This webinar I entitled How to Crush the First Day of School. So I intended this one to go out to those of you who are beginning school. Maybe you've already started. But in any event, the idea is we're here at the beginning of the year and we are looking at a lot of time ahead of us. So the thing would be like thinking about, all right, so how do we move toward this thing called school? How do we get this thing going? And what I'm going to present to you is my way of doing things, the ACT Matrix way. Certainly you have to do it my way, but this is my version of how to crush the first day of school. And I've had many first days of school, both early in my career as a teacher, later in my career as a counselor, and then for most of my career as a psychologist. So very familiar with the first day of school. It brings a lot of interesting experiences with it, both exciting and somewhat frustrating at times. So I'm here to lend a hand and do what I can to try to facilitate people moving toward that value direction of education. So let's begin. You should be able to see slides. I'm going to advance them. You may see my eyes darting around a bit as I work in the background here, since I am the chief cook and bottle washer. So this webinar is being held in August of 2019, which basically means that in the next few weeks, in my neck of the woods, and probably in yours, students and teachers and everyone who supports this grand enterprise of education, and there I would be in counselors, nurses, school board representatives, on and on. We are all heading back to school. And these folks will be spending something like, commonly in public school, we're talking about 182 days over the next 9 or 10 months, moving toward what we call an education. They're going to be logging in thousands of hours in the classroom and many hours out of the classroom, studying, preparing, researching for school. So the question that pops up in my mind is, well, okay, so why school? Why, seriously, like what is it for? What are we doing with this thing called school? Why are we doing this? Now, isn't this a question that's on the minds of millions of educators right now? You're kind of questioning, why am I doing this? What is this all about? And also, you have your students who are actually doing the same thing. Why do we have to go to school? What is this thing all about? And that's a great question to be able to ask. Don't have an answer here right now. I don't have a long, definitive answer, but I'm going to take a stab at it, thinking about this and try to, I like to look at things pretty simply, and the ACT Matrix is a very simple and sustainable approach to things. So when I think about school, what I think about is school really is a place where we come together, we, the collective we come together to learn together and to grow. And that's a pretty good working definition, I think. School is really the place where you get to meet and interact with lots of different people. It's probably the most diverse setting that you come in contact with in the normal course of your growing up years. It is the melting pot. Again, I'm speaking more directly about public schools, of which most people are in public schools. Yeah, we have a lot of private schools and we have religious schools, but most of the students are attending public schools. So we're going to go here with the consensus, and even in the non-consensus, schools are really diverse places. So it's a place where we come to learn about others, either by direct instruction or by thought, word, and deed. And we get to see basically that there are a lot of ways of going about living and learning. And you meet people that, come from different walks of life and different traditions, and they have different ways of doing things. So essentially what school helps us to do, at least here in the Western world, is it teaches us, we learn how to get along with each other, folks. And then the other thing that school is there, it's really there for helping us to grow. So, somewhere down the road, we're going to be able to have a place in the world where we can contribute and help to move things along. So growing means really also challenging each other as we do so and moving out of your comfort zone, taking some chances. Think about that first day that you put your child on the bus. You know, there was a lot of fear, there was excitement, there was a whole bunch of stuff. It was a challenge that your child was going off to a new experience. And really and truly, every time you return to school, it is a new experience because they're older and they come in with different experiences, and everybody else is coming in with them is coming in with different experiences. So we're all moving out of our comfort zone, at least in the beginning stages of school, and really, you know, we're taking our chances as we go along. So the next question really here, now that we're in school, well, okay, what do we want people to learn, right? What is it that we want our learners to be learning? This is another very important question. And what I'm doing now is just kind of setting up that little bit of that context for you. Let's think about this for a minute before we dive in, right? So, okay, here's what the folks who are the movers and shakers in business and in education, here's what they tell us are what they call the 21st century skills. So those in need are telling us that these are the skills that are needed. And, you know, the idea here is that if kids can grow and develop and have these skills, as they come out, they're going to be okay. Not that there's any guarantee about that, but if you have these kinds of skills going on for you, then you're going to be able to get out there in the world and do what you need to do and make your way in the world. And I really think that this is an interesting list because it seems to me that these skills are also the skills that are going to allow individuals to be adaptable. And that, I think, is really what it comes down to. Our kids need to be adaptable because the world is changing so rapidly, so quickly, that we really can't predict with any degree of accuracy what it's going to look like in 5 or 10 years from now. It's changed so much, even in the last 5 or 10 years. And, you know, these skills right here, collaboration and teamwork, creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, you know, like very often refer to them as the soft skills. But it seems to me like these are more skills for living. And I'm glad to see that there's more and more interest in making sure and addressing these kinds of skills because it isn't so much the content that's going to help our students down the road. It's really that they know how to get involved in a process wherever they go, that they can move into a process and they can adapt and they can change and they can learn what they need to learn. But anyway, this is what the powers that be hope our young people will be equipped with as they move out of school. So here's another list. This list is a list that was actually developed by some high school students. They got a whole bunch of them together, did a little research survey kind of thing. And these are the skills or the qualities that young people feel they need to be successful. And this is what they want to be able to get out of their time in school, to be able to come up with these skills. So, you know, I'm seeing some overlap here. So I'm seeing that basically the pundits out there and the students that are coming into school, there's some general level of agreement about what we need to be doing here. So now we get back to, well, you know, what is it about school that allows all of that kind of stuff to be taking place? Well, here's what I think. Learning takes place in relationships. And really, this is what schools offer that the internet and social media cannot. No matter how hard they try, they just cannot do that. It is really what gets everyone showing up for school. So, you know, for effective learning and effective social and emotional learning, as a psychologist, I'm also interested in social and emotional learning. It takes place in relationships. And then we're going to have to find ways, if that's really the case, and we really are saying that that is the case, that's what the research is telling us, that we really need to find ways to collaborate with students. And really, let's face it, kids are in school to know, and they're also in school to be known. I think primarily first by their peers and also with the wider world, but really they're there for their They're a peer group, basically. So then if we really step back, what both the pundits and the students are telling us, if we are listening and paying attention, is that relationships are really important. And that what is needed as far as school goes is going to be found in their connections, their day-to-day connections with themselves and with other people they come into contact with as they go through the school day. So now the big question then is, how do we do this? What is the best way to set things up to increase the chances that they learn what they need to learn? And now we're going to be getting into like how you can crush it. So to be able to walk through that, though, first thing I want to be able to do is to take a step back for just a second and really want to talk a bit about what you want to avoid. There's certain things that you do want to avoid. If everyone shows up at school and they can move toward learning and growing, then they're going to have a good chance of having a successful school year. I mean, like right here at the beginning days of school. And there are definitely some things that you want to do, and there are definitely some things that you might not want to do that's really going to help your classrooms, I would call it, soar. Because if you do these, if you kind of avoid some of these things I'm going to talk about, do some of these other things, you are going to have a high functioning, productive, happy, healthy classroom to get started with. Then you've increased your chances, and now we see what the rest of the year is going to bring us. So the best way to begin is to establish what I would call readiness for learning. Readiness being I'm able and I'm available to take in and to contribute and to be a part of this thing called school. Now, people come in with all kind of different levels of readiness. So what we want to do is set up conditions that we get, the largest percentage of people on board with us, and then we gather in the fringies, as I say, as we go along. Now, again, there are many ways that work and many that don't. And the first few days of school, you really want to create conditions for success. Pretty much all year long, but it's especially critical those first few days. So I say, take the time and get a few basics down. It's going to save you a lot of frustration, you're going to spend less time spinning your wheels, not sleeping at night, and generally feeling stressed out. So let's go through one of the biggies that I see and I've seen over the years. In many cases, when things start heading off the rails or in the wrong direction, it is maybe most cases, I'm going to say most cases, it's going to come down to a failure to communicate, folks. If you are having problems in your classroom, it is highly likely that they're due to a lack of communication. And this is what leads you into those difficult conversations, or it leads you into avoiding having those difficult conversations with students, with peers, with parents, with colleagues. It's a failure to communicate that really starts to bog things down. And what a lot of times what happens is, we're educators, so we're speaking in our lingo. We have our language. And the kids are speaking in their language, and it's kind of like islands that we're not really even having a conversation along a shared perspective. So that's one of the things that we really want to do is get a shared perspective going. So we're going to proceed. So the other thing that gets in the way very often is we forget to connect and collect, is what I would say. You don't engage them. Either we're not engaging them, or we're making it hard for them to engage. So how does this happen? Well, a lot of ways. One of the ways that I see is when we're pushing our agendas instead of setting a context for productive learning, right? In other words, here's what we're going to do, and here's what you need to do, and here's when this is, and it's all of this just jumping right into our agenda. And again, there's a lot to do. I'm not saying that we're not going to get to it, but there's a process and a way we can go about doing this that's really going to set everybody up for success. And there's ways that are going to start shutting things down. So, if you find yourself getting into authoritarian stances, that's also going to get in the way, because there's really no amount of additional authority, in my opinion, that you can add that's going to increase cooperation with students or having students want to learn and go with you. Authoritarianism just is not going to do it. And I think our experience actually tells us that. So we want to, make sure that we're connecting so we can, connect and then collect them, gather them in, so we can all kind of head toward whatever it is that you want to be doing in the classroom. So you really want to begin then by setting what I call setting a context for productive learning. And the way we're going to do that, the first thing you got to do is you got to validate their experience. And, they meaning your learners. And really what I'm saying by validating is to really validate what it's like for them to be there with you, what their experience is. So to do that, you want to open up some channels with them to get that validation going, then having them work with you rather than against you. And now again, there's many ways to go about doing this and having these kinds of conversations. And having conversations really is exactly what I'm talking about here. And you can do validation in any way that fits for you, because really when you're doing validating and you're validating their experience of what it's like to be a student in school, you're just having what I call a human-to-human conversation. And I happen to have discovered and trained others in this way, this ACT matrix way, that works quickly to set up a productive validating context. And those that go on and use it, and you're probably using it yourself, hopefully, they come back and they tell me that it works very nicely to get engagement and cooperation going with students. So let me proceed. So let's just say that you're there with your learners, and the first thing that you might be saying to them is something like this. You just go ahead and ask this question on the first day of class, and that's going to begin the process of finding out. You just start with their experience. You just go ahead and you ask them, well, what are you here for? And then they're going to tell you. And then you write down whatever it is that they say. Even if they say, hey, well, I'm just here because my parents made me come to school. I'm going to say, great, thanks for letting me know. Boom, that's validation, folks. It's really that simple. You don't have to get complex. You don't have to do a lot of reflective listening. It's really just asking people simple questions and then looking to get responses back from them that are going to be, a validation of what it's like for them in that moment. And this really is the secret to getting productive learning going. And that's about beginning by validating the experience of the learner. Because when you're setting up this context for productive learning, what you're trying to set up is the conditions under which that person gets curious, they get engaged, and they want to learn more. And, whatever it is, it doesn't matter, whatever they say, because you're just going to validate it. And they're probably not there for the greater good at this point. They're not thinking about 21st century skills probably at that moment. They are not there to make you happy. I know that for a fact. I've had many experiences. They weren't there to make me happy. They're not even there to make themselves happy most of the time. Most of the time, they're probably there because they're making their parents happy. Someone tells them they got to school. They know they got to go. So, they're just there to hang out with their friends. So we're just validating that, and we're just having a conversation with them about that. And having real conversations with students, in my opinion, is the key to having a successful classroom. And your students will definitely appreciate you having this kind of conversation with them instead of the usual, what I would call fake conversations about what we're here to blah, 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 that really don't lead to cooperation. And, you can actually see their ears kind of turning off or the earbuds go popping in or whatever the case may be in the setting that you're in. So I'm going to ask that question. Now, what I might do then at this point, since I'm an ACT matrix guy, is I'm going to now move on to a great way to get people to lean in with you is to invite them. Just simply invite them. So being invited to do something feels a whole lot better than being told what to do. Wouldn't you think? So I'm going to ask the question, can I show you my point of view? Is it okay? And one of the great things that invitations do is they work real well to get responses. So I say use an invitation. So that will usually lead to getting some response back from your students. You want them responding. The more they respond to what you're asking, the better. Now you kind of get a dialogue going, get a conversation going, and now things are up and running. Okay? So I would ask that question, can I show you my point of view? And that's going to then lead into, behind me, I will already have drawn my handy-dandy matrix, which those of you on the call hopefully have seen before. And if you haven't, this is the matrix. And this is the way that I might train somebody, if I come to your school, or if I came to, if I did a workshop or whatever, even this right now is online training. So it works really well to get the senses going, because we need our 5 senses, and have students also becoming aware of what their minds are up to. So we're looking at, the first thing we're looking at is helping them to notice what's going on around them. And we might be helping them to notice what's showing up on the inside of them. And also things they might be able to do to move toward, as well as things they might be able to do to be moving away. And I really think that one of the reasons why this works so well is that the damn thing is really just a target. So when I have it up there, before I even begin, people just start staring at it. So their attention is already drawn to it. So now you have them staring at the matrix diagram, and you will have a question up there. And I highly recommend you start with this question that I have up there right now. And the question basically is, who is important to you? And that's how we start. So we just proceed from there. So a little bit about this ACT matrix diagram, because often people will ask me, they will say, you know, well, how would you describe it? Or what is it, people that don't know what it is? So I've kind of gone back and forth about this over the years. And I've decided to say something like, well, you know, it's really a cognitive behavioral approach to values-based behavior that quickly engages people in a collaborative learning process. That sounds very erudite and learned, but basically it's a visual diagram that helps you to have healthier and happier classrooms, and helps your learners to get where you want to go. That's kind of a short answer. But if people want something a little bit longer or more involved, people seem to be satisfied when I say stuff like that. And again, as I said, it's really a diagram of how we learn, because we take in information from our 5 senses. That information flows down inside of us. And we need both our senses and our mind to go about the world and figure things out. And while we're doing that, we can also notice the difference between how it feels to be, you know, taking in information with the 5 senses versus when we are what I would call maybe stuck in our heads. You know, if you're pondering something deeply, you know, time can go by and all of a sudden you realize, oh, you know, I miss doing this or I miss doing that. Well, that's an example of where you're down there in the mind. Now, if you're out there playing a game or something like that, playing basketball or something, well, you're probably up here more in the 5 senses, where you're paying very close attention to what's going on around you, to what you're doing, to yourself in space, all that kind of stuff. At the same time, we move toward individuals and things in life that are important to us. And we also move away from uncomfortable inner experiences, you know, like fear. And in the middle is good old psychological flexibility, which is really just we're going to be noticing all of this in whatever situation that we find ourselves. So you can go about and use this model to continue to set up the context for productive learning and really get that learning pumped up even on the first day of school, folks. So let me proceed. Again, it's based off of acceptance and commitment therapy and training. And the whole goal here is increased valued living while reducing suffering. Now think back to those 21st century skills. Well, those are valued living skills, right? So really ACT works very nicely to increase and enhance all those skills that those pundits out there want us to do. At the same time, it works very nicely to reduce suffering. I'm not going to eliminate it, but we can kind of get it down and people can learn how to manage that stuff that's showing up along the way to moving in this valued direction. And the principal developer, again, Dr. Kevin Polk, he is the man who created the Matrix. And I came along, I've been working with him for many years. And I have developed my website, Evolving Solutions, where I do training and consultation. And also Matrix Goes to School, which is my older website. And together, Kevin and I are trainers in ACT Matrix certification. If anybody's interested in that, you certainly can contact me, and I can give you more information about that. So after we've asked this question, going back to the matrix diagram, who's important to you, I'm going to jot down whatever they say. So if they tell me that their mom or dad's important to them, well, that's going to go down there on the lower right. Very often, they're going to tell me what's important to them too. So they might say, you know, I'm there, but my phone's important to me. That's the biggie I hear. Great. I'm going to put that down, and we're writing this down on the board. The who's and the what's, pets, people, whatever, we're just going to put it up on the board. And what starts to happen is the kids get engaged. They're going to start responding to you. They're going to start giving you their who's and their what's. And then we're going to be sliding over here to the lower left, and now going to be asking questions about, well, you know, on the way to moving toward important people and things, you might notice sometimes uncomfortable stuff shows up inside of you. Stuff like fear, anger, you know, and you might even notice, you may even have some of that stuff right now. Who knows, right? Like, for example, it's the first day of school. Well, you know, I'm a little nervous myself. I might go first. So my nervousness might show up inside of me here. I don't like it, but there it is. I got it. So anybody got anything like that? And now people are going to start to weigh in. Yeah, I'm tired, or yeah, I think this is going to be boring. Whatever they say, I'm going to say, great. I'm going to put that down on the board too. So now we're just getting out whatever that is that's going on the inside of them. And now they are learning the skill of being able to actually verbalize stuff that's going on the inside of them in this context called school. Because let's face it, folks, we have not just that outside stuff that we're taking care of. We talk about this thing called the whole child, right? The whole child we're talking about. We're going to educate the whole child. Well, the whole child is also what's going on inside the child too. And I personally think that we do a bit of a crappy job about educating the inside of the child. You know, we're really good at the outside stuff, but we don't pay a lot of attention to what's happening inside. And what we want to do, if you really want to get, you know, you want to help kids to recognize that whole inner inside of them, that is also important. And we can talk about that here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But after we have that conversation, now I want to be lifting up their eyes, I call it, because once we go above this horizontal line up here, we're talking about all the stuff that people do. So here, people do stuff to move away from this yucky stuff down here that they don't want. You know, like if I'm afraid, I might run. If I'm angry, I might yell. If I'm tired, I might put my head down. So I'm going to do some action to get some relief from that yucky stuff. And that could be the thing that actually needs to happen. Or it could be something that I'm just going to continue to avoid. Don't know, but we're just getting people to talk about that a bit. And now they're really cooking. They're getting the hang of it. They're starting to come up with stuff. And now we've got this engagement level, which is just kind of increasing. And that's going to lead me all the way over here now. Now we're completing a loop. We're doing a loop through here all the way around. And next question I'm going to ask is, well, you know, what do you want to do to keep moving with that yucky stuff toward who and what's important? Matter of fact, you know, he did something really important today, I always tell them, which is, where are you right now? Well, they're in school. So even if they were complaining of being tired or being bored or whatever, there they were. They actually showed up, and I'm going to give them credit for that. So one of the things about doing matrix work is you give credit for anything that they do, both toward and away, because they're responding to you. So we're really wanting them to engage, or giving them credit, or grooming engagement and cooperation as we go along. So when we get all done, we have like what I would call a big picture view. So each student, and you can do this maybe individually, they can do their own, you can do it with a group. Either way is fine. It's a matter of personal preference, I find, because I think I haven't really found a situation yet where kids were reluctant to do it. Everybody does it because it's very engaging, and you're not really, it's questions that anybody can answer. It's real simple. So then what we're going to end up with is we're going to end up with me, whoever I am, noticing my stuff. So there's me right here, and I'm doing this thing. We're adding this skill of noticing. Noticing is a behavior, folks. It's an action that we do. We take stock of things. So now that's another thing that you're going to need if you want to develop skills. You got to be able to step back and say, okay, you know, where am I? What do I need to learn? So we build up what I call observer self here by getting at this me and noticing. And all we've had them do is just do some noticing. And we haven't really told them what to do. And it's done in a very nice, gentle, non-judgmental way. We're not talking about right or wrong here. We're just simply noticing, and they're noticing the big picture view of themselves. Now, I can't help but think of a very famous person years ago, and those of you that are listening on the podcast may know him as Mr. Rogers. And Mr. Rogers may have been an early Matrix guy, and certainly around, he may even have used it. But Mr. Rogers really said it best because he said that he believed that all feelings were mentionable and manageable. So that's exactly what we're doing here. We're basically saying that whatever's going on the inside, we can have a conversation about. We're not having deep conversation, but we can kind of acknowledge it. We can accept that it's there. And once we acknowledge it and accept it, it becomes manageable. It becomes something less to avoid and more something that we can, well, here's that word, just notice. Okay, I can notice that I'm tired and I can begin doing my work. I can notice I don't feel like being here and I'm showing up for school. Things like that. So I always like to give Mr. Rogers a shout out here. So moving along, what we're really up to then is we're doing two things. We are validating, right? We're validating the student's experience as they, in their lived experience, as they go through their lives. And we're also engaging in what I would call, we're fascinating. And by that, we're really working with those we serve. And if you do this validation and fascination stuff, and the fascination really comes from they're talking about themselves, folks. People love to talk about themselves. Kids love to share their experiences with you, both their experiences they want and the ones they don't want. The best subject matter for them is me. So we have them talking about me in a very flexible way. So as we do that, we're getting this fascination thing going, right? So we're getting validation going, we're getting fascination going. And if you do this, you will be taking big, giant steps toward a flexible context for you and your students to continue to go on and learn and grow together. Because this is really just about being in the moment with them, folks. First, you validate them, and then as they respond, they're talking about their favorite thing, and they're talking about the story of themselves. What better story to tell? And that's going to make it much easier now to go on and do the other things that you want to be able to do. So what we're doing here, and another caveat, a mistake I see that people do is they get into this correct and convince stuff. So if you're fine at doing a lot of correcting and convincing, by using this type of approach, you can really crush it because you're going to be moving more towards what we call workability. And workability is a big shift because now you're going to start asking a different question. And that's really going to generate problem solving versus being stuck in a loop of always looking for the right answer. Correct and convince, that's what people think of when they think of school. I have to have the right answer. I have to get the good grades. I've got that wrong, therefore I stink. All of that stuff shows up on the inside, and it does little to nothing to increase problem solving. Very often all it does is it gets people to shut down. So, we want to be able to set up this context where people keep that problem-solving brain of theirs going and then benefit from whatever they notice about what just happened. We usually call that a mistake. I call it, well, you did that thing, and then this thing here happened. So now the question becomes, well, how is that working for you? Did that work out? Did it work out for you in terms of getting you where you want to go? So we go from this right and wrong stuff to the question, is what I'm doing working to get me where I want to go? Like right now, is what I'm doing working to get me where I want to go? And the ultimate question beyond that is to move me toward who and what is important in my life and who I want to be. Because all of these young people that are with you are moving toward the person they want to be in life. And they're not fully formed yet. So, they want to be able to step back. We want to help them get that perspective taken going so they can step back and say, all right, am I on track? Am I not on track? Do I need to make a course correction? What's going on here? So we're helping them to ask the question, and then they're going to answer the question themselves. It's not even necessary that they answer it out loud. It's really, the important thing is that they get to ask the question, because then they can just simply do this thing called noticing. Right? Just back here, just noticing, right? All right, well, now I get to notice what the consequence of that. What happened after that? Do I want it? Do I not want it? Is there something I can do to change that? So back up here, what we're really then doing with this matrix and really, working to kind of crush things here on the first day is we set up this flexible context, because you got everybody up here, right? You're all in the room together with your five senses, looking at each other, hearing each other, getting up close to each other, maybe even smelling each other, hopefully not tasting each other. But you're having all that information going on. And at the same time, while you're all doing that, you as a teacher, you're having your own little mental experience going on there of both the stuff that you want and the stuff that you don't want. And your student is having the same thing. So all of that is going on in the present moment. And we have this context now that we've shown them that we can use to pull things together. It ties, the matrix ties conversations together, and it ties them together in ways that work. So now we're looking at things together. You get a shared point of view going on. That's going to groom cooperation. If you use a little bit of that language, that's going to groom it even further. So now we have this very cool thing called workability going on. And here is a little more complicated diagram that I'm not going to spend too much time on, but I like to put it up here because that's kind of the full what's happening, right? So we have our senses, we have our mind, we have our moves doing toward, moves doing away. And now in the classroom, we're looking at a little different situation. And what I've done here is I moved on and showed you what the second loop around the matrix might look like, because we just did the one loop. The second loop we would do with the group. And now once we have that flexibility going, we'd be asking this question right here, which is, what is our shared purpose? And now we're back to, what are we here to do? And I mean like today, like right now. What are we here to do, right? We got all that 21st century skill stuff, great. But like right now, we've gathered here today for some purpose. Reading class, social studies class, right? Why are you here? What's brought you in the room, right? Is there some other purpose why you're here? I'm just here to get credits. Great, that's fine. I'm just here to graduate. Great. I'm here because I failed this class, I gotta take it over again. Terrific, right? But we're all there for that shared purpose. And then along the way, yucky stuff's still gonna show up. Even if you want to be in the room, there's going to be days that you're not feeling it, you're not bringing it, and we just get to notice that stuff. And now we have that conversation, if we need to, about that stuff. It's okay to have it. We're making it okay to talk about these difficult experiences. And we also can be noticing if we're doing things to move away from that yucky stuff. Could be that we need to take a break. Could be maybe somebody's coming in late or not at all. And they're doing that stuff to get away from that yucky stuff down there. But see, now they can see it. Now they really kind of have to own, yeah, I'm doing it to move away from my anxiety, or I'm doing it to move away from the I hate school stuff, or I'm just doing it because I'm, just worried about something else. It could be anything. But now, we're able to have places to put it, places to talk about it. And now as the group, we can also be doing this brainstorming thing up here. As a group, how do we want to go about doing this class, right? What's going to work for us? How do we want to be treated? How do we want to treat others? Since we're in this melting pot called school, how are we going to do this thing? And then outside, right, is it working? We're always going back to that. Okay, is this thing we're doing here, is it working for us? Do we need to make a change? And is it working for that life that we want to be living? And we want to be moving toward this sense of satisfaction, which occurs when we go over here and do these toward moves and then achieve those things that we set out to achieve. Like, we got through the class. It was a difficult class, but we made it. Great. Satisfaction shows up. As opposed to, all right, we were really stressed out today, so we took a break and we did something a little bit different, got a little bit of relief. But that was also for that shared purpose. Ultimately, we're going to get back at this again tomorrow. Today wasn't going to work so well. So it's this constant back and forth of making these toward moves, I call them, and away moves over time that lead us toward this getting to workability. So, takeaways very quickly. So crushing it is going to be inviting and collaborating with the students, is really what I call the pro-social matrix communication process. Builds interest, builds engagement. Again, helping them to notice their actions by asking interesting questions with respect. These are all very respectful questions. Is going to build awareness, going to build relationships between teachers and students and between students and their peers. And then inviting them to put those experiences onto the board. It's going to build up that perspective taking, that observer self. And then they learn how to do that skill, and they increasingly start using that skill on their own. That's what happens. So that including them in the decisions of the classroom, like we just talked about, monitoring, keeping track of things, sharing that process of the classroom. This is our room, is building this social awareness, and it's helping them with decision making. Back to those 21st century skills. It's very, very empowering. And you're building a pro-social community when you do that. So there's my thoughts about how to crush the first day or the first few days of school. Hope that you find that useful. Before I sign off, I do want to talk to you a bit about how you can be staying in touch. Obviously, if you're getting the recording, you are staying in touch. I thank you for that. If there's future topics you want to see, please shoot me an email, let me know. Another thing I want to tell you about is that Kevin Polk and I have started a podcast. It's called The Art of Being with the ACT Matrix. We're having a lot of fun. We have good-natured conversations with different people about different aspects of ACT Matrix work. We've had educators on, we've had sports people on, lawyers, people working with people in finance, all kinds of people. And I would encourage you to come on board too. If you're doing some type of matrix work and you want to come on and talk about what you're doing, it's a lot of fun. It's no hot seat stuff. I know some podcasts can, it sounds kind of like they're raking people over the coals. We don't do any of that. That's not what we're about. We're just about having some fun. And we really are interested in hearing what people are doing out there because we think that the ACT Matrix is a very cool thing. Also, I do online and live training. So I'm available for that. And you'll see announcements for that as the year goes on. And then there's my contact information right there, the last slide. And I wish all of you a successful school year, or at least a successful beginning of the school year. And go on and have some fun. And we will see you down the road. Look for my next webinar announcement, probably somewhere near the end of September. So there you have it. Take care.